Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and welcome to this series of lectures on the invisible hand. And it's going to be a multiple part discussion because this is an important topic. So, as I like to do a lot, is go over what the learning objective is. And the learning objective of all of these classes on net neutrality is to find the optimum role of the community in commerce in general, and of course, net neutrality in the internet in specific. So assuming some form of market equilibrium is optimum, can market equilibrium be achieved without any help from the community? If so, how? So in the previous lectures, I talk about market equilibrium. And I talk about how important market equilibrium is on any number of different ways. This is, in my humble opinion, the fundamental question of our time, in that how much community should be involved in trying to achieve market equilibrium. It goes to the central question of what constitutes limited community involvement, what a lot of people like to say of limited government. So for this class on net neutrality, the question is, can the internet manage itself just fine without community oversight and/or rules? And this is where we get to the invisible hand, is do you need the community to step in to manage the internet, or will it manage itself just fine? The term invisible hand was first coined by Adam Smith in his book, The Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And he saw the invisible hand as the belief that equilibrium, and again, this is why I went over equilibrium before, because Adam Smith specifically was striving for equilibrium, and he thought that equilibrium is achieved by the unintended social benefits resulting from individual actions. And that's a key, I think, for any free marketer is going to agree with that. And so this becomes then the important discussion point. Buyers and sellers, according to Adam Smith, free of any government interference and merely following their self-interest, will arrive at the optimum distribution of goods and services at the right price, as if guided by an unseen hand. Therein is where Adam Smith talks. It is the notion that individuals' efforts to pursue their own interests may frequently benefit society more than if their actions were directly intended to benefit society. And we see this a lot. We hear about it in the welfare state, and I'm going to talk a little later when I talk about unintended consequences and a few other moral hazard and a few other things, that many free marketers believe that anytime the government, and again the welfare state, anytime the government or the community steps in to directly manage the economies, the benefit is not as great as if people were pursuing their own interest. Adam Smith said, quote, "By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectively than when he really intends to promote it." And I think this is critical, and it makes perfect sense to me. Smith assumed that individuals try to maximize their own good and become wealthier. And by doing so through trade and entrepreneurship, society as a whole is better. This is why libertarians and conservatives and free marketers believe what they believe. This makes perfect sense on its face. Furthermore, they believe any community intervention in the economy isn't needed because the invisible hand is the best guide of the economy. And we've talked a lot about Hayek and central planning and information, and you can see how this all fits together. At least in my mind, this makes perfect sense. Though I couldn't find any direct statement, I believe, based on what I know, that Adam Smith saw a connection between the invisible hand and God. To Smith, and perhaps many today, God-fearing people will act as good actors, on average, enough to keep things in equilibrium. And this, by the way, is why I talk about economics and religion as being a part of the same discussion. In the theory of moral sentiments, Adam Smith describes a selfish landlord as being led by the invisible hand to distribute his harvest to those who work for him in a moral way. Let me read the quote here. The rich are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of the necessities of life which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions among all of its inhabitants, and thus, without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interests of society. So therein lies, if you look at conservative thinking, Republican thinking, libertarian thinking about welfare state and limited government, I think you have the essence of what they believe. And it makes sense, sort of. Elsewhere in the theory of moral sentiments, Smith described the desire of man to be respected by the members of the community in which they live, and the desire of men to feel that they are honorable beings. In The Wealth of Nations, he wrote, by pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of society more effectively than when he really intends to promote it. Therein you have the key, I think, to understanding conservative and libertarian thinking. The key terms there are advance the interests of society and frequently promotes that of society. So in terms of net neutrality, you can easily see how this applies to net neutrality. Let the internet manage itself. The marketplace is the invisible hand and will ensure optimum performance. And remember the discussion we had with Hyatt on pricing, that the pricing is the invisible hand, that you see this played out in any number of different ways where the marketplace exerts the invisible hand. All right, in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about how the invisible hand applies today.